Hey, I've been subscribed to your channel since the very beginning, and a story that really got me from your channel was the one about a guy who plans to retire in the Philippines. But when along the way he met a single mom who destroyed his retirement dream, and in the process he lost around $20,000 to $30,000 and went back to square one, all his dream vanished before his eyes. I've never written anything this long before, but I just had to share this story that's been haunting me for weeks. I found this email from my old friend Liam, who used to run a bar in Boracay, Philippines. And honestly, it's the most devastating thing I've ever read. I think your audience needs to hear this. It's a masterclass in how dreams can become nightmares when you're not prepared. I'm going to share the whole thing with you because every word matters. This isn't just another expat gone wrong story. It's a blueprint of how paradise can swallow you whole if you're not careful. Picture this, and I mean really picture it. Me, Liam, sitting on this rickety wooden stool outside my bar, Liam's place. As that beautiful neon sign above flickered against the sticky heat of a 2005 Boracay evening. God, I can still smell it all. That intoxicating mix of grilled liempo sizzling on nearby carts, the yeasty aroma of cheap red horse beer, and that underlying scent of salt and possibility that only a beachfront town can offer. The bar was absolutely alive that night. I'm talking wall-to-wall with sunburned tourists from Germany, Australia, and the US, all mixing with my loyal Filipino regulars who'd become like family over the years. The laughter was infectious, bouncing off the chipped paint on my bar's facade like music. Behind the counter, I had this collection of Polaroids, hundreds of them taped up in a chaotic collage of smiling faces. Every single one represented a story, a connection, a moment when someone found exactly what they were looking for in my little slice of paradise. I remember standing there surveying what I'd built from absolutely nothing. 18 years earlier, I'd arrived in the Philippines with barely 2,000 pounds in my pocket and a head full of dreams that everyone back home in Liverpool called bloody stupid. But look what I'd done. I had taken this crumbling shack that was literally falling apart with a roof that leaked during every monsoon and walls that looked like they'd been painted with whatever was left in discarded paint cans and turned it into something legendary. The locals called it Liam's place even before I put up the sign. Tourists would ask other tourists, "Have you been to Liam's place yet?" It wasn't just a bar, it was a destination, a rite of passage, a place where stories were born and friendships were forged over bottles of beer that cost less than a coffee back home. That night, as I watched a group of backpackers teaching some Filipino university students how to play beer pong while an old American expat told war stories to anyone who'd listen, my chest swelled with this incredible pride. This was my kingdom. I was the king of this little corner of paradise. And every single person in that bar was there because of something I created from nothing. The fairy lights I strung up were casting this warm glow over everything. And the sound of waves crashing just 50 meters away provided a perfect soundtrack. I had regulars who'd been coming for over a decade, staff who treated me like family, and a reputation that stretched from Boracay to Manila and beyond. I didn't know it then, but that night was the last time I'd ever feel like a king. Let me take you back to 2008 because that's when everything started to unravel. And though I thought I was making the smartest decision of my life, the bar was doing incredible business. I'm talking packed every single night, with people sometimes waiting an hour just to get a table. I was turning away customers, which in the hospitality business is both a blessing and a curse. I had this vision, this beautiful, ambitious vision of a rooftop deck. Picture it. Sunset parties overlooking the Sulu Sea, private events, maybe even small weddings. I could see it all so clearly. String lights creating a canopy of stars, comfortable seating areas where people could watch the sun melt into the ocean, while sipping cocktails I'd personally crafted. The problem was I needed serious money. Not the kind of money you saved up over time, but the kind that requires taking a massive leap of faith. The banks in the Philippines weren't exactly lining up to lend money to a foreign borrower, especially one without the kind of collateral they wanted to see. That's when I met Mr. Alonzo through a friend of mine. He wasn't a bank, he was what you might call a private lender. And looking back, that should have been my first red flag. But when you're caught up in the excitement of expansion, when you can practically taste the success, you ignore red flags like they're just colorful decorations. The meeting took place in this upscale restaurant in central Boracay, all glass and chrome and air conditioning that made my bar seem quaint by comparison. Mr. Alonso was impeccably dressed, spoke perfect English, and had this way of making you feel like you were the smartest person in the room for coming to him with your brilliant idea. "Liam," he said, sliding the loan documents across the table, "I can see you're a man who understands opportunity. This rooftop deck will triple your revenue within 6 months." The numbers he showed me were intoxicating. Projected profits that would have me paying off the loan in 2 years and living like a king for the rest of my life. I remember the weight of the pen in my hand as I signed those papers. My signature felt bold, confident, like I was signing my name in the history books of successful expat entrepreneurs. The loan was for 2.5 million Philippine pesos, about 50,000 pounds at the time, with interest rates that seemed reasonable when spread across the projected timeline. The first few months were incredible. Construction began immediately, and watching that rooftop deck take shape was like I was watching my dreams materialize in real time. I'd climb up there every evening after closing, imagining the parties, the revenue, the expansion that would follow. But then came the first late payment notice, slipped under my door like a snake in the night. The construction had taken longer than expected, cost more than budgeted, and the rainy season had delayed the opening by 3 months. Suddenly, those reasonable monthly payments felt like mountains I had to climb every 30 days. I told myself it was temporary, that once the rooftop opened, everything would be fine. I had no idea I just signed the first page of my own destruction. If the loan was the first crack in my foundation, then Jomari was the earthquake that brought everything tumbling down. I met him in 2010, 2 years into my loan payments when I was already feeling the financial pressure but still optimistic about the future. Jomari was everything I thought I needed in a business partner. He was Filipino, which meant he could navigate the bureaucratic maze that constantly tripped up foreign business owners. He spoke fluent English, had connections throughout Boracay's business community, and most importantly, he understood the local pyramid system that had been giving me headaches for years. "Liam, my friend," he'd say with that warm smile that I now know was practiced in mirrors, "you focus on what you do best, making customers happy. Let me handle the boring paperwork and government stuff." It sounded like a dream partnership. We shook hands on a deal that gave him 30% of the profits in exchange for handling all permits, licenses, and local government relations. No contracts, no lawyers, just a handshake between two men who I thought shared the same vision for success. For the first year, everything seemed perfect. Permits that used to take months were approved in weeks. Government inspectors who used to find problems with everything suddenly had nothing but praise for our operation. I thought I'd found a missing piece of my business puzzle. But then I started noticing small things. Cash registers that didn't quite match my mental calculations. Receipts that seemed to disappear. Jomari always had explanations. Exchange rate fluctuations, unexpected permit fees, tips for government officials to keep things smooth. The truth hit me like a monsoon flood in late 2011. I'd stayed late one night to do inventory, something I'd been putting off for months, because I trusted Jomari to handle the books. What I found in those ledgers made my blood run cold. Entries had been altered. Profits had been systematically siphoned off. Money that should have been going toward loan payments had been disappearing into accounts I'd never seen. The numbers were staggering. Over 800,000 pesos had vanished over 18 months. I confronted him the next evening under a flickering street lamp outside the bar. The conversation started civil, but when I showed him the evidence, his mask slipped completely. "You stupid Kano," he snarled, using the Filipino word for American, often used broadly for Westerners, like a weapon. "You think you can come to my country and get rich without paying the real price? This is how business works here. The shouting match that followed drew neighbors from their homes. I demanded he return the money immediately. He laughed and told me to prove it in court, knowing full well that as a foreigner I'd be fighting an uphill battle in the Filipino legal system. By morning, Jomari had vanished. His phone was disconnected, his apartment was empty, and half of my cash reserves had disappeared with him. I was left holding loan payments I could barely afford with a business partner who'd stolen my future and disappeared into the night. The final nail in my coffin came from the most unexpected source. The very government system that Jomari was supposed to be protecting me from. By 2012, between the loan payments and Jomari's theft, I was operating on financial fumes. Every peso that came in went straight back out to cover basic expenses. That's when I made the mistake that would ultimately destroy everything. I let my visa expire. It wasn't intentional negligence, it was financial desperation. The visa renewal fees, combined with the required proof of funds that I no longer had, created an impossible situation. I kept telling myself I'd sort it out next month when business picked up, when the high season brought more tourists. But next month never came, and the fines started piling up like monsoon rain. In the Philippines, overstaying your visa isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's a serious offense that compounds daily. What started as a manageable fine quickly became an insurmountable debt. I remember the first time I walked into the immigration office, trying to explain my situation to an officer who looked at me like I was just another irresponsible foreigner who thought the rules didn't apply to him. The fine had already reached 50,000 pesos, and it was growing by 500 pesos every single day. "You pay now or you go to detention center," the officer said matter-of-factly as if he was discussing the weather. The detention center, a place where overstayers were held until they could pay their fines or be deported. I tried everything. I appealed to embassy officials who looked at me like a lost cause, another expat who'd bitten off more than he could chew. I begged friends for loans. But word had gotten around about my financial troubles, and suddenly everyone was too busy to take my calls. The bureaucratic nightmare consumed what little energy I had left. Every day I wasn't dealing with visa issues was a day I couldn't focus on saving my business. It was a vicious cycle. I needed money to fix my visa status, but I needed legal status to properly run my business and make money. By 2015, the fines had reached nearly 200,000 pesos. I was essentially trapped in the Philippines, unable to leave without paying a debt I couldn't afford, unable to work legally, and watching my life's work crumble around me. I need you to understand something about hope. It's both the most beautiful and the most dangerous thing a human being can possess. Even as everything was falling apart around me, I kept believing that somehow, some way, I'd find a solution. That's what made the morning of March 15th, 2022, so devastating. I woke up to banging on the bar's door at dawn. Not the gentle knocking of an early customer or the familiar tap of my cleaning lady. This was aggressive, official, final. Through the cracked window, I could see a man in a crisp white shirt holding a clipboard, flanked by 2 local police officers. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. I knew what was coming, but knowing and experiencing are 2 completely different things. The landlord's agent, a thin man with cold eyes who spoke English with mechanical precision, slapped an eviction notice on the splintered wood of my door. The red ink seemed to scream, "Final warning," in letters that burned themselves into my retinas. 30 days to vacate. 18 years of my life reduced to a single sheet of paper with an official stamp. I tried to negotiate, to explain, to beg. "Please," I heard myself saying. "Just give me 2 more months. The high season is coming. Tourists will be back. I can catch up on the rent." But the agent just shook his head and walked away, leaving me standing there with that piece of paper fluttering in the morning breeze. The bar felt different that day. The empty stools seemed to mock me, each one a reminder of the laughter and conversation that used to fill the space. Behind the counter, those Polaroids of smiling customers looked like ghosts from a happier life. I found a napkin with an unpaid tab scribbled on it, 340 pesos from my last regular customer, an old Australian named Pete, who'd been coming for 8 years. He hadn't even said goodbye. I spent the rest of that day trying to call old friends. People who promised they'd always be there if I needed help. But phone lines went dead. Numbers were disconnected, and the few people who did answer suddenly had emergencies that prevented them from talking. By evening, I was sitting on the bar floor clutching a warm bottle of Red Horse beer that I'd found on the back of the cooler. The electricity had been cut off 2 weeks earlier, so the neon sign that had flickered so proudly for 18 years was dark and lifeless. "This can't be," I whispered to the empty room, my voice echoing off walls that had heard so many stories, so much laughter, so much life. Not after 18 years, not like this. But it was. The kingdom I'd built from nothing was about to become nothing again. And I was about to discover what it really meant to lose everything in a foreign land. What I'm about to tell you next is the hardest part of the story to share, but it's also the most important, because this is where the romantic notion of the expat dream gets stripped away completely, revealing the brutal reality of what happens when you fall through the cracks in paradise. After the eviction, I had nowhere to go. No savings, no friends willing to help, no family to call back home. I'd burned those bridges years ago with my stubborn insistence that I was living the dream while they were stuck in their boring lives. Boracay's beaches, which had once represented freedom and possibility, became my bedroom. I found a spot near some palm trees, far enough from the main tourist areas to avoid the police, but close enough to the 7-Eleven to use their bathroom when the staff weren't looking. The first night, sleeping rough, I told myself it was temporary. Just a few days until I figured something out. I had a tarp I salvaged from the bar's storage room, and a thin blanket that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. Then the monsoon season arrived. If you've never experienced a Filipino monsoon, you can't imagine the sheer violence of it. The rain doesn't just fall, it attacks, turning the air into a wall of water that soaks through everything. My tarp became useless within minutes, and I found myself huddled against a palm tree, shivering in the tropical heat as water poured down my face and back. The rain would last for hours, sometimes all night, and there was nowhere to hide. The beach that had once been my kingdom became a muddy, flooded nightmare where I fought for every moment of dry comfort. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the hunger. When you're homeless in a tourist town, you become invisible to the very people who once paid your bills. I learned to time my movements around the street food vendors, waiting until they closed to check their garbage bins for anything edible. I remember one particularly low moment, finding a half-eaten pancit in a plastic container behind a tourist restaurant. The noodles were cold and soggy, mixed with cigarette ash from someone's discarded meal. But I ate every bite because I hadn't had a proper meal in 3 days. The shame was overwhelming. Here I was, a man who'd once employed 12 people, who'd hosted parties for hundreds of guests, who'd been featured in travel blogs as a must-visit destination. And I was literally eating garbage to survive. But there were moments of unexpected kindness that kept me human. A street vendor named Aling Nena, who sold mango slices to tourists, started giving me a free mango every few days. She never said much, just smiled and handed me the fruit like it was the most natural thing in the world. One evening, after she'd given me a particularly sweet mango, I broke down completely. I sat on the sand, still wearing my faded Liam's Place t-shirt, the cruel reminder of who I used to be, and sobbed like a child. The waves crashed nearby, the same waves that had once provided the soundtrack to my success, now witnessing my complete destruction. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the rain or even the shame. It was the realization that I'd become a cautionary tale, a whispered warning among the expat community. Don't end up like Liam. I'd see other bar owners sometimes, people who'd known me during my successful years. They'd look away quickly, afraid that whatever had happened to me might be contagious. I became a ghost haunting the edges of the paradise I'd once called home. During those months on the beach, I had a lot of time to think. Too much time. I replayed every decision, every mistake, every moment where I could have chosen differently. The loan, trusting Jomari, ignoring my visa status. Each choice had seemed reasonable at the time, but together they had created a perfect storm of destruction. I started writing then, using scraps of paper and broken pencils I'd find discarded by tourists. Writing became my lifeline, my way of processing what had happened, and maybe, just maybe, warning others not to make the same mistakes. If I could travel back in time to that humid Manila airport in 1987, if I could grab that 23-year-old version of myself by the shoulders and shake some sense into him, here's what I'd say. Listen to me, Liam. Listen like your life depends on it, because it does. You're about to step off that plane with 2,000 pounds in your pocket and a head full of dreams that everyone back home calls stupid. You think you're different, special, that the rules that apply to other people don't apply to you. You're wrong, and that arrogance is going to cost you everything. First, and this is crucial, save money like your life depends on it. I know you're thinking, I'm young, I'm in paradise, I should live it up. But that mindset will destroy you. Every successful expat I knew who survived long-term had one thing in common. They saved aggressively during the good times to survive the inevitable bad times. Set aside at least 30% of everything you make. Not 10%, not 20%, 30%. Put it in a UK bank account that you can't easily access. Call it your disaster fund, your deportation fund, your life preserver, because there will come a day when you need it desperately. And if it's not there, you'll end up sleeping on beaches and eating garbage. Learn the language properly. Not just enough to order food and chat with bar girls. Really learn it. Take formal classes, hire a tutor, immerse yourself completely. Your inability to truly communicate in Tagalog will cost you hundreds of thousands of pesos in bad deals, misunderstandings, and people taking advantage of your ignorance. When Jomari approaches you with his smooth talk and promises, run. Run like your life depends on it. Never, ever go into business with someone based on a handshake and good feelings. Contracts, lawyers, background checks, these aren't signs of distrust. They're signs of intelligence. Understand the visa laws completely, not just the basics. Every detail, every requirement, every potential pitfall. Hire a proper lawyer to explain everything to you in writing. Your visa status is your lifeline in the Philippines, and letting it lapse is like cutting your own throat. But here's the most important thing, the thing that hurts the most to admit. Don't use the bar's noise to drown out your loneliness. I spent 18 years surrounded by people but never really connecting with anyone. I had customers, employees, drinking buddies, but no real friends, no family. No one who cared about Liam, the person, rather than Liam, the bar owner. The isolation made every bad decision worse because I had no one to talk to. No one to give me perspective. No one to tell me when I was making mistakes. Build real relationships. Stay connected to your family back home, even when they don't understand your choices. Maintain friendships that aren't based on business. Paradise isn't a place. It's a trap if you don't know who you are. The Philippines will seduce you with its beauty, its freedom, its apparent simplicity. But underneath that surface beauty is a complex society with rules and hierarchies and expectations that we'll never fully understand as an outsider. Respect that complexity. Don't assume that because you're successful in one area, you understand everything. And finally, have an exit strategy. Always know how much money you need to leave with dignity and know when it's time to go. Pride will tell you to stay and fight, to prove everyone wrong, to rebuild from nothing. But sometimes the smartest thing you can do is admit defeat and start over somewhere else. I ignored all of these lessons, and it cost me everything. I'm writing this from a place of complete destruction, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone else will be smarter than I was. Don't be me, Liam. Be better. I'm typing this at 2 a.m. from a beachfront shack that I don't own, using a borrowed phone with a cracked screen that cuts my fingers every time I swipe. The sound of waves crashing nearby used to be the soundtrack to my success. Now it's the rhythm of my desperation. My fingers are shaking as I type this. Partly from hunger, partly from cheap whiskey that helps me sleep, but mostly from the urgent need to get this story out before it's too late. I can feel my strength fading, my hope diminishing with each passing day. The monsoon season is coming again, and I'm not sure I can survive another one. Last year nearly killed me, and I'm weaker now, more broken, less able to fight for each day of survival. But if one person reads the story and learns from my mistakes, if one dreamer thinks twice before making the same catastrophic decisions I made, then maybe this wasn't all for nothing. Maybe 18 years of building something beautiful and 7 years of watching it crumble will have served some purpose. Please, I'm begging you, share this story. Tell people about Liam. You thought he was different. You thought the rules didn't apply to him. You confused luck with wisdom and pride with intelligence. Tell them about the bar owner who became a cautionary tale, who traded a kingdom for a handful of terrible decisions. Don't let my story end in silence on a beach in Boracay. Let it be a warning, a lesson, a reminder that paradise can become hell faster than you can imagine if you're not prepared for the fall. I'm not sure I'll make it through another monsoon, but if one person listens, maybe this wasn't all for nothing. Liam, once of Liam's place, now of nowhere. I'm sending this now because tomorrow might be too late. I had to stop reading several times while going through this because it was so intense. It was just like I'm feeling it too. This guy's story is absolutely heartbreaking, but it's also incredibly important. I think your channel will be perfect for sharing this kind of cautionary tale. It's got everything your audience loves. Real human drama, lessons about international living, and the kind of raw honesty that makes people think twice about their own decisions. What do you think? Would you consider to also make a video about Liam's story? I feel like it needs to be heard, and your platform could really make a difference in preventing others from making the same mistakes. Keep up the amazing work on the channel. Your content has helped me understand so much about the realities of expat life, and stories like Liam's show why that education is so crucial. You've a dedicated subscriber. I know this email is super long, but I felt like every word of Liam's story mattered. Thanks for taking the time to read it all. I want to say to this sender that you're welcome, and thank you. And if anyone listening has any stories that they want me to tell, please send it to me through the email showing on screen. Thank you, and also shout out to Liam and the sender.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more amazing content.